wanted to let everybody know that now it's recording. Want everybody to know that I'm recording, and like all the other webinars that we've been doing today and yesterday and on Wednesday, these recordings will be available on the remotelearning.dpsk12.org website. And Aaron Kimmel will be posting links to all the resources in the chat throughout as people join late, as that is one of the limitations that we currently have with Google Chat or with Google Meet, is that you don't see the whole chat unless you've already been in the room the whole time. So we'll make sure to capture all those chats and capture the recording, and then try to answer your questions as best we can. So let's get started. All right. Aaron Kimmel, who is on this session, actually put together these lovely slides to orient your approach to Google Meet. I have found them enormously helpful for myself and enormously helpful for reminding people about some of the basic options. So take a look at those at your leisure. I think we're all ready to go. I think everybody's muted at this point, and we'll keep moving. This linked here will also take you to the Q&A. If you don't want to post it in chat, you want to post it in the Q&A document, you can do that there. One other thing I just wanted to tell everybody is that this is the view from my porch. And this essentially has been the view from my porch for the last 2 months. It's a little bit more distracting now that I'm working from home. They are replacing water mains down the middle of my street. Also, my wife is attending webinar sessions. She's a DPS teacher. My daughter is doing some learning. She's a DPS student. And so I wanted to help remind myself, and also just let you all know that we need to have a lot of grace for ourselves in this process. Not only are we all learning a lot of things and trying to do a lot of new processes, we also are dealing with lots of different distractions. Some serious, some not, as we are trying to figure out how we approach remote learning for our students. And so just want you to have some grace and patience for yourselves, and grace and patience for your students as well, as their environments that they are working within are also varied and challenging. This image also cracks me up and has been cracking me up all week. My life is a series of conference calls now, and this all happens all the time. And so those of you who want to play on your own, feel free to see what you check off as you go. Okay, so topics. We're going to be covering Google Drive, Google Docs. We probably won't cover slides much in depth because we actually have other sessions that are talking about slides. We also probably won't be talking about Google Forms very much either, just because there have also been sessions about Google Forms, and all of those sessions have been recorded. We'll dive in, if we have time at the end, we'll dive into Sheets and just some of the basics around it. We'll talk about how to organize your Google Drive. We'll talk about sharing, and then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about converting Microsoft documents to Google and how to make sure that those get saved into your Google Drive. So what are all of these things? If you haven't had a whole lot of experience with Google, there is DPS has something called G Suite for education. And so what that is it's a series of Google applications that are productivity apps. So basically the same kinds of things you would see in a Microsoft Office suite. They're all online, they're all web-based. All of the work that you do in these is auto-saved, and it allows for easy collaboration among your colleagues. So Drive is where everything gets stored, and all of those files, you can drop as many files as you want, because we are a G Suite for Education organization. That means that you have unlimited storage. So that's videos, that's pictures, that's even Word documents if you don't convert them. Anything that you might be dropping into that drive, storage is unlimited. Docs is just like Microsoft Word. Slides is like PowerPoint, and Sheets is like Excel. All right. So let's start with Drive. So if you go into, if you go into Drive, this is what you'll see. This is my colleague Nikki Tygeson's very pretty Drive. When we go into mine in just a minute, you'll see that mine is not so pretty. She likes to color code and add emojis and icons to her folder names, and I'll show you how to do that. But mine's not quite as pretty. But if you take a look here on the left, you'll see kind of like your basic navigation tools. In the top right, you'll see this gear icon. That's your settings. Look for that anytime you're in a Google app. Actually, most online applications have that gear icon for their settings. And then across the top here, you'll see files that you've recently opened. Your folders will be down here. This is the grid view. I'll show you both the grid view and the list view. And then there are add-ons you can add on to Drive here. We won't spend a whole lot of time talking about those, but for particular kinds of productivity, you might find some add-ons helpful. But let's go into Google Drive. I'm actually going to close all these things here. I'm going to add a tab. So the way I like to do it is I actually just like to open a new tab and go and just start typing drive.google.com. That takes me to Drive. The other way to get to Drive is if you open a new tab and then you click on the little waffle here, you can see Drive right here. And so you can click on Drive, it'll take you to the same site. All right. So I have mine set to list view right now. Grid view is right up here. Actually, I'm going to close this just to make it easier for everybody to see. This is grid view. So this will get you back to what you saw in the slide deck. So you have your quick access up here. You have all your folders, and then you have all your files, and it's thumbnails of those files. I'm going to go back to list view. This I will just give you details. So if I selected this folder right here, and apologies, I did not turn off my text messages. So ignore. But you can get details for your files here. All right. So as I was showing on that slide deck, you have My Drive. So My Drive is everything that you have access to that you've added into your Drive. So this is files that you own and files that other people have shared with you that you have added to your Drive. And there's a lot of different ways to organize this. You can create folders, you can drop things in. You can also do searches up here. And then you can also see, as I said, you can see all these documents right here. We'll talk about priority in just a minute. Shared drives, these are sort of, they used to be called team drives. These are basically places that you can drop files into that don't have an owner. So some schools use shared drives a lot. I have mixed feelings about its efficacy, and I'm not going to dive too much into it because it's pretty specific. So check with your school about whether or not you guys use shared drives. But some of you may, some of you may not. I'm going to go into shared with me real quick. So within shared with me, you'll see anything that anyone shared with you, and it's organized by recency or last modified. Something to keep in mind there is that if something is shared with you, that doesn't mean it's in your Drive. And a quick way to change that is if we take let's say this elementary math remote learning, let's say I want to add that to my Drive. There's a couple different ways I can do it. I can right click. And once I right click, I can click add to my Drive. Anytime when you're in Drive, you can right click on a file or a folder, and that'll tell you basically all the things you can do with that file or folder. So I can add it to my Drive right here. And I can even, without actually going back to my Drive, I can even move that document around. So let's say I want to put it in my test folder for fun. I can do that. All right. And quick advanced pro tip, let's say I want to put it in two different places. So I want it in that one folder that I just put it in. Let's say I want to put it in a different folder too. So I can do Shift Z. So I can highlight this document again. I can press Shift Z. And that allows me to add it to a different place. So let's say I also want to add it to, let's say I also want to add it into this meet recordings. I'm just going to add it into, let's add it into screenshots just for fun. And I don't have to wait for that to all open. I can just click add here and then it's added. Recent is any files that you've been working with recently or something that may have been shared with you recently. Starred is where any of your files that you might find that you've already starred. To star a file, so if I go back to my drive, let's say I want to star, I don't even know what document 2 is, but let's say I want to star that folder. I can right click, I can add to starred. The other way I can do that is let's go into the sample presentation folder. Let's say this document. I'm going to open this document. Let's say I really want to make sure that this document is also starred. I can actually do that inside the document just by clicking this button. And that way, when I go back to my drive and I click on starred, now you'll see that 2 document there and that copy of getting started from square 1 document are both in there. I'm going to talk about priority real quick, and then I will stop for a couple questions. I also want to just point out that trash. So trash is kind of like trash on your computer. You can drop something in there, and it's okay if you drop it in there. That doesn't mean that it goes away. It just gets out of your way. You can empty the trash, but I'd recommend you don't really need to just because you don't have to worry about storage. But just know that that's where those files go when you throw them in the trash, or when you click remove, that they will go into that trash folder if it's a file that you own. Going to priority. So priority is kind of like, it's a fairly new thing in Google Drive, but basically what it does is it allows you to create workspaces. So let's say I have particular documents that I want to use, and it's all the documents are about this Google Basics webinar. So I could create a workspace and then add a bunch of folders and add a bunch of files into there. So if I click create, I could say Google Basics, can't type, webinar 2. And I click create. And now I can actually I can select some of these files. I can even choose other files from here. And then the nice thing is that I can put up to 25 files in there. And if those are all the files I'm using for that particular project, then I'm in good shape, and it allows me to access those quickly. Okay, that was a lot, and I want to stop and make sure that I'm addressing any questions. So Erin, are there questions?
I don't know. There were just a couple people who maybe needed to see how you could change your screen layout so that they could see your presentation in full screen. So it's more of a question.
Sure. All right. So if I'm in Google Slides, I would just go here and I go full screen. That is in terms of the slide deck. This is the place to go. You also can change your layout, by the way, in Google Meets. So if you go down to, if you're in Google Meet, you can actually go here under the more options. You can change your layout, and you can also select full screen yourself. I'm not sure if that will help you or not, but those are some of the things that I've been using when I've been attending webinars where people are toggling between the slide deck and the areas where they are demonstrating. Okay.
And we have 2 questions about workspaces. One is really just, can you review what a workspace would do, how you would do that? And the other would be, what's the reason to use starred versus a workspace?
It's a good question. So the nice thing, I'll start with starred. Starred, let's say there's like there's literally one document that you go to every day and you're tired of searching for it every day. that would be a reason to use the starred feature, if that makes sense. Priority would be if you're thinking about particular categories of documents that you like to use a lot, and you're going to be using them a lot over the course of a day or a two, or for a particular project. Kind of think of it. I like to think of priority as like a project-based organizational tool, whereas starred is like literally what are some of your daily routines and daily documents that you need to access constantly, and you don't want to have to search for them. So I could create another one. So like let's say one of the things a project I'm working on right now would be I'm reviewing all of the MyTech documentation, and so let's say I create a new workspace called MyTech documentation. And so here, I could even search. And I could go to, so I know one of the documents I want to review is the MOU. I should probably be more specific. MyTech MOU working draft. That's one I definitely want in there. And now it's trying to, and because Google has their algorithms, it was also trying to find other files that I might want to use. And so there's an MOU working draft, there is a backwards plan working draft, and there's a performance gates working draft. So I would maybe add all of those in, and it just makes it easier for me to look at those documents holistically and not have to go searching for them in different places. Okay, are there other questions? Okay, all right. I will go ahead and go back to the slide deck, and I will present it until we get back into Drive and I start talking about some of the other features. And going full screen, hopefully that'll help some of those of you who are having a hard time seeing it. So these are the things we discussed. Oh, I did not discuss new. Let me do that real quick, because that's really important. This new button is your best friend inside of Drive. You can create new Google Docs, new Google Sheets, Google Slides. And if you click on more, any of the other Google apps, you can create a new version of those right here. The other thing you can do is this is where you can create a new folder. You can also upload files or even upload entire folders. And when we talk about converting Microsoft Office files in a few minutes, then I'll come back to this. Okay, so we've discussed these. This helps me remind me what I haven't covered. So I actually want to make sure that I'm covering the advanced search real quick as well. So I'm going to get back out of the slide deck and go back into Drive. So I love the search function inside of Drive. Its advanced features are super helpful. So if you click on this little drop down, let's say I want to just find some Google Forms. So any Google form I've got in my Drive, it's going to find it. And let's say I just want to find the ones that I own by me. And you have a lot of other options here in terms of even more granular search options, more technical, more specific. But for my purposes, I'm just trying to remember all the different forms that I own. I can't remember exactly what the one that I'm looking for is called, so I click search. And now I'm going to see all the file, you see how it says under owner, it says me. So that means this is just finding all the Google Forms that I own. Okay. Have I covered color coding folders, Aaron? Sorry, this is a back-to-back session. I actually don't remember if I already covered that.
It's on slide 13. How far are you?
I am on slide 11.
Okay, not yet.
You actually have not covered that yet. You've just talked about how pretty Nikki's is, but you haven't shown us how to do that yet.
Gotcha. All right. I'll show you how to do it real quick. All right. So let's go into color coding folders. As it says in the slide deck there, that's how you do it. But let's go here. Let's say, let me go back to my drive. See this test folder for fun I've got? If I right click on that, I can change the color here. Let's say I want it to be my daughter's favorite. Well, spearmint's not really my daughter's favorite color, but that's the closest to teal that I see on that page. If you're also wondering how I put that emoji in, you can go to copyandpasteemoji.com, I believe. And then you can basically copy an emoji. And then when you rename a folder, so if I right click again and I click rename, you can actually paste, like copy and paste an emoji in order to add that into your folder name. The nice thing about adding those symbols in is that for some kinds of folders, those symbols might help you remember which folder it is. The other thing it can do is if you add particular kinds of symbols, like a plus sign or a hashtag sign, Google will actually prioritize those in the alphabetizing. So if you organize your files, your folders by alphabet, then those hashtag and plus signs and those stars, those will come up first in the list. So and you can organize it by name here. Okay. All right. So that's color coding. Okay, we just talked about starred, talked about priority, talked about advanced search. All right, so let's talk about sharing permissions. Couple things first before we start talking about sharing. Please do not share any student data with anyone outside of Denver Public Schools. That is part of the federal law called FERPA. We want to be very protective of our students' data, so please do not share documents that contain student data with people outside of DPS. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you set permissions on a file for any time you share a link with anyone in Denver Public Schools, can view or edit or comment, that means everybody in DPS. And so that includes students. So just keep that in mind as you are setting permissions for your documents. And so let's talk about sharing. So let's start in Drive, and then I'll go into a Google Doc. So let's say this test folder for fun. Let's say I want to share that with somebody. So remember that what I said, if you right click, all the different things that you can do with that folder are there. So you can click share right here. Now let's say I want to share it with Aaron Kimmel. And let's maybe say Lindsay Scales. And so then right now, the way it's set is I have it so they can be, I can allow them to organize, add, and edit that folder. I can give them view-only rights just to that folder. I'm comfortable. I work with them. I'm comfortable with them having edit privileges to that folder. Under this advanced, just so you can see it, you'll notice that it's private. So there's no anyone with the link setting that is currently set. And then also, if I give them edit rights, I can also actually keep them from adding other people with edit rights, and I can prevent them from changing the way the access works to this document. That's really helpful to know. It's especially helpful if for some reason you wanted to share edit rights with a student, but you don't want them to be able to make copies. And so I'll show you what it looks like when we're actually just sharing a document as well. But this is what it would look like if you're sharing a folder. If you want to change the default sharing, you can also click change here. And that allows you to do, these are in order of least restrictive to most restrictive. So if you have it set to share, link sharing is on, public on the web, that means anybody can access the document. Anyone with the link, that means anyone with the link inside or outside of a DPS. This third one means that anybody at DPS can find it and access it. And that means like they could search for it and find it. And then the next one is with the link. So that means they can only access the document if they have the link to the document. And then off is just that it's shared with specific people. All right. So I'm going to send them a little message. And then send. And so they would get a notification in their Gmail, their .NET, that I shared something with them, and then they'd be able to access that. Let's go in this document, or this folder. And we've got Google Basics. And this is not my document. This is actually Nikki's. But let's say, so this document here, if I right-click on it, I can manage the sharing permissions again. And so right now, because Nikki owns it, I'm seeing the way that Nikki has set the sharing. So she has it set to anyone with the Denver Public Schools with the link can view. I'm going to create a document so you can see how I manage sharing. So if I click New, and I click Google Doc, and I click, do you see how it is telling me that I'm creating it in a shared folder? So what that means is whatever the permissions are that are on this folder, my document that I'm creating will have the same permissions as a default. So I'm going to click Create and Share. And I'm clicking up here, and I'm going to change the permissions. Or I'm going to change the name, sorry. Test document. And you'll notice here this little arrow with a file folder icon on it. You'll see that it's already in that test folder, and that's good to know. It also means that Aaron and Lindsay would have access to the document, and they could edit it as well. Let's say I want to change the permissions on this document. So I click Share. And I click Advanced. And here I can actually change the permissions. I can even set an expiration date for how long they can edit it. I've actually never used this tool, but I can imagine it might be useful if you are doing, let's say you're sharing a document with your entire class, and you want all of them to participate in the document, but only for a certain amount of time. You can actually set their permissions to expire. So they would eventually only have view-only rights to that document after they had the edit rights. You can also change individuals' permissions right here. And you can change that link sharing like we talked about here. Okay. All right. I'm realizing this space is taking up a lot too. So I'm actually going to scroll this back down. Talked about these sharings. Talked about shared with me. View only, just a reminder that if you set view only on a document and you don't change any of the other permissions for it, that's fine. And maybe you've decided that you want to, you really like somebody else's resource, but they've set it to view only. You can still go you can go file, make a copy. In fact, you could even do that with this slide deck that you guys have access to. You just click on File and then make a copy. Once you create that copy, it exists in your drive and you have full edit rights to it. Okay, before I start talking about word conversion, I want to stop for questions again. Aaron, are there questions that I should address?
You are going to cover how to convert Microsoft to Google later, right?
Yes, about to do it right now.
Perfect.
If there are not other questions. Okay. Well, let's get into conversions. So converting Microsoft files to Google. As many of you know, DPS is engaging in a full transition to Google and moving away from Microsoft. I know that makes a lot of people feel pretty anxious, and understandably. We all have our workflows that we use, and if we've been using those workflows for a long time, it's hard to shift them. And so I want to talk a little bit about how to make that a little less painful for those of you who have been spending a lot of time in Microsoft in your teaching career. So let's get started. All right. So one of the things to think about is if you are using, if you have bunches of documents on your computer in a folder, or maybe they aren't in a folder, and you want to get those into Google Drive. This slide kind of talks about the ways to do that. The really cool thing is when you upload files into, when you can upload either files or folders into Google Drive directly from your computer. And so when you do that, the nice thing is that if you have folders inside of folders and you have files inside those folders, if you organize all of that inside of a folder on your desktop, you can pull that whole folder with all of the subfolders and the files in it. You can pull all of that directly into Drive, and those folders will retain their structure. So this is helpful if you've got tons and tons of files that you need to upload. One of the things I want to highlight as you do this, so I'll show you how to upload those folders. So let's go back into Drive now. All right. So let's say, so right now I'm in my test folder for fun. Everybody see the gear icon here? Go ahead and click on that, and then click on Settings. Under Settings, you'll see a button here that says, or a section here that says Convert Uploads. Convert uploaded files to Google Docs editor format. So what this will do is if you've got a Microsoft Word file that you upload, it will convert that Microsoft Word file into a Google Doc. If you have a PowerPoint slide deck, it will change that slide deck file into that PowerPoint file into a Google Slide file. If you have an Excel file, it will convert that Excel file into a Google Sheets file. This is helpful to do. The reason to go ahead and actually convert those files is that allows you to more efficiently set collaboration for those files. It also allows students to manipulate them. Say if you posted them on Google Classroom or Schoology, it just makes it a lot easier to work with the files in a collaborative environment where other people would be needing to gain access and make modifications to that document, or if you need to make modifications and changes to that document. So once you have that box checked and you click Done, now if I go to New and I go to Folder Upload, I now am seeing my desktop. I'm looking at a Finder view. I have a Mac. And you see how I have this sample presentation folder? And it's got a Word document in there. You can tell it's a Word document because it says .docx. And so I'm just going to highlight that folder, and I'm going to click Upload. And you see that it showed up. Notice that it's got a little person in the icon for the folder. What that means is that this folder is now also accessible to everyone else that has permissions to this top level folder. And if I click here, you'll see that it converted my Word document into a Google Doc. And now all the things that I've been talking about that you can do with sharing and editing, you can do that with this document. And then I can share it differently here if I'd like to. Okay. That may have generated some more questions, so I'm going to stop again and see if there are any questions.
I don't see any in chat, but if somebody has one, they can maybe throw it out.
Yeah, I'd agree. At this point, if you are, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question, that's totally fine by me. We have not too many people in here.
Can you show that just one more time, moving a Microsoft Word document into there?
Sure. All right, so I'm back in my sample presentation folder. And then I go up here and I click New. And then I would go to Folder Upload. And once I go to Folder Upload, and it depends on what kind of computer you have, I'm just going to go back to my desktop. So if I wanted to upload this sample presentation folder, which I know has nothing in it that I'm worried about sharing, I would select that folder and I click upload there. And because of the settings where I have it auto converting documents that get uploaded, and that's under the settings again. So if I go to settings, the gear icon, and I just make sure that this box is checked for converting uploaded files to the Google Docs editor format. Did that answer your question?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Other questions?
Stephen, you talked a little bit about this, but when we're working with Schoology, can you upload an assignment? When that assignment gets uploaded from your drive, it automatically will create a new document for students?
So when you create an assignment in Schoology, you are given the option of finding a Google Drive file to attach to that assignment. If you attach a Google Doc to that assignment, it will set, basically what happens is when students open that Schoology assignment, it will create a copy of that document for students. And then that is the document they would work on, and then they would turn that in by submitting their assignment via Schoology. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and then it will automatically create a way for me to see all students' work.
Yes. So you would be looking at the submissions as they come in inside of Schoology. There is also a folder that gets generated into Google Drive that you can navigate to. And Aaron, Kimmel, you might actually, I don't remember what Schoology calls that folder. Can you help me with that? Is it just called like Schoology folder or something like that?
Sorry, I was double tasking. Which folder?
So when for Schoology assignments, so like you have attached a Google Doc to a Schoology assignment.
Yeah,
if you wanted to go to Drive,
it should say Schoology Google Classroom. I can pull mine up and find out exactly what it says. Something like Schoology Google Docs. It's pretty clear.
Yeah. So you'd be able to review that student work both inside of Drive and in Schoology. I'd recommend going ahead and reviewing the documents inside of Schoology. If the students are submitting it there, it just makes it easier for you, and you'll be able to review the documents, make comments there, and then also any grading that you might choose to do, or any feedback that you do via Schoology.
Yeah, it's Schoology Google Drive assignments is what it automatically downloads to.
Yes. I'm just looking at some of the questions too. So there's another question about Schoology being a lasting product for DPS. That's an interesting question, and I think that it's hard to predict those kinds of things. I will tell you that I would say we're probably at about half to 2/3 of the MyTech schools use Schoology pretty heavily and are fairly happy with it. We have other schools who use Google Classroom. I don't think I think there's pros and cons to using both. My recommendation, at least within our current environment, is that if you're not already using Schoology at your school and working with your students, I wouldn't recommend trying to spin that up as a part of your remote learning approach. If you're already comfortable with Google Classroom, or Seesaw, or you have other applications that you're already using with your students, I'd recommend using those rather than trying to start using an entirely new learning management system.
And then there's a question about pushing assignments out through Seesaw.
Yeah, I believe Seesaw has a Google Drive integration. It's actually not a tool that I've used. It's primarily used in elementaries, and my experience has been almost exclusively at the middle school and high school level. So I'm not sure if there's somebody else in here who has some Seesaw experience, but they can feel free to speak up. I don't want to I don't want to say the wrong. I don't want to give wrong advice there. we can also do some follow-up on Seesaw. If you post that question in the Q&A document, we can track some information down about that. There is also a Seesaw webinar that I think was delivered at minimum on Wednesday. So you could actually check that webinar and the resources related to that webinar in order to get some more information about Seesaw.
And Steve, can you make your presentation screen a little bit bigger, and can you demo how to change the colors of a folder again?
Sure. So making my screen bigger, I'm already on full screen. Well, I guess
I think
this is full screen.
enlarging like so that you're seeing less of your drive at once.
Okay. So like, for example, if I go here and I just zoom in a little bit, is that what we're asking?
I think so.
Okay. And by the way, with my Mac, I just kind of double tapped on the screen with 2 fingers in order to make it bigger. And so I'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. I'll actually also review the color. So if you're in Drive, you're going to right click and you're going to scroll down and you're going to go to change color. So now let's change it to purple dino. That's pretty awesome. And so that's how you change a color. Okay. Other questions? Can you change the setting of a file or folder if you drag and drop the file? Yes. After you drag it and drop it, then you would just select it, right-click it, and then change those permissions. So let me actually see if I can do that without too much trouble here. So let's say I have this sampler presentation folder here, and I just want to drag that directly into my drive. I don't want to drag it into one of those folders. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. All right. And notice that it's the same name, and it actually recognizes the same name. I'll go ahead and tell it to keep it separate just for the purposes of our presentation. And you see that it created sample presentation folder 1. And so I can right click on that, and then I can change the sharing permissions right there. Okay, going back. Okay. All right, other questions?
Can you just go over, can you try and drop a document into a shared folder and show the message that you get about the sharing permissions?
Sure. So just a folder from my desktop of my computer?
I think just showing like the message that Google gives you if you're taking a file and dragging it into a shared folder. Just how does that impact permissions or not?
Okay. All right. So let's say, let's drag this into screenshots. So that, not sure I understand the question. So that, the thing to know is that if you drag a file into a folder, what it's going to do is whatever the permissions of that folder are means that's what the document's going to do as well. So if this folder is shared with anybody else, and maybe that's why it didn't tell me anything, is because I haven't actually shared this folder with anybody. So let me do that. Okay. Now let's say, I want to move this document into that. So let's do that. So scroll up, screenshots. Move to shared folder. Moving this item will share with everyone who can see the shared folder. So when you are taking a file, and let's say that file is set to private, but you're dropping it into a folder that is shared, that document that was private now becomes a shared doc based on whatever the permissions are for that folder. And then, so I'm going to go ahead and say yes. But let's go ahead and go into that screenshots folder. And let's say I definitely want it to be in that folder, but I don't want anybody to actually be able to do anything with it. I think it was, I don't remember which document it was, but I'll just use this one. Right click on the document. And you see how it's shared with whoever else has access to this folder? I can change that right here. And then I can start pulling people off of that document. And I can change it so specific people can access it. I can change it to anyone with the link can view. And it'll keep once I've changed those permissions while I'm inside this folder, that document will keep the permissions I want it to, but it will default to whatever the folder is if I don't change it. Okay. Other questions? Oh, I'm seeing a really good question around sharing, so private. So one thing to know is that you can, it's a good question. So the question is, how can I keep my folder private to my school, meaning not sharing it with all of DPS staff, for example, MTSS files? I think what I would recommend is, there's a couple different ways to do this. If you already have a folder that your school has shared, let's say your principal has shared a folder with everybody in the school, and that whatever the permissions are that are already at that for that folder, if you drop files into there, it won't be shared with everybody in DPS. It's an interesting question, and I don't know the answer to, as to whether or not you can just say, I want to share this document with Marie Greenwood Elementary or Hill Middle School. I don't believe we have that level of control. That would be in a situation where shared drives may be the most appropriate way to do that. And we haven't talked about shared drives in this, but creating a shared drive that only a certain number of people have access to, and then putting that folder or that file inside of a shared drive. That might help make it more restrictive. And I suspect that some schools are already using shared drive for just the purpose that you identified. I'm just looking through the chat to see questions here. I've run into the problem of students creating personal copies of files in order to share with other students after I assign a document on Schoology. Is there a way to tell if and when students are creating copies of documents? I know Google captures edits within a document. Let's see. There's a couple answers to that question. The first super technical answer I can think of is that DOTS, so our Department of Technology Services, I believe would be able to track that kind of detail down based on the level of access they have to our Google Apps domain. So I think it's technically possible to do that. I think maybe an easier way to manage this is, let's say you don't actually want them to, maybe you actually don't want them to make copies at all when you share a document with them. Even if you're giving them a copy that they can edit, you could set the permissions to expire. You also could prevent editors from making copies or prevent editors from making changes later. So for example, so if I'm back in this copy of getting started from square one and I click share, and let's say I'm going to put Erin Kimmel back in here again. Appreciate her being my guinea pig. So you see where it says under owner settings, prevent editors from changing access and adding new people. Disable options to download, print, and copy for commenters and viewers. So if somebody has edit rights, they can make copies. And I'm not sure if there's anything you could do about that other than setting an expiration on it. So let me go ahead and say, yes, I'm giving Erin permission to edit this document, but I don't want her to have editing permissions forever. I can actually click set expiration. And then I can actually say how long I want her to have edit rights to that document. So then that may help in terms of preventing unwanted copies of documents that you have put out there for students to use. Carlos, did that answer your question?
Hi, Stephen. This is Carlos. So I guess my question is more because when I'll create a document and I'll assign it on Schoology, and I know that Schoology then creates a document for all my students of that single document. The settings I set in my original document that I linked to Schoology, are those settings then transferred to all the documents? Like if I originally set it to not allow students to make copies, like will that transfer to all the separate documents that are then created in Schoology?
So the short answer is I don't know, but we'll find out. My guess, just making assumptions on how those work, is that no, it won't. So if you set it to make a copy for each student will have full edit rights to that document, and that wouldn't change. The only option I could think of off the top of my head, and I have not tried this, so I don't know if it'll work, would be if you navigated to the folder where all of those files are collected inside of Google Drive, and you set an expiration on access inside of that folder. Maybe that would work. The worry I have about doing that is I don't actually know how that would affect how those files get shared inside of Schoology and whether the copying would still work after that point. That would be a question I would want to ask our Schoology product manager, because that's a pretty specific technical question that I don't know the answer to.
I know, I'm sorry. I know this is
no apologies.
Probably not the right session.
It's all good.
I just thought maybe I've had this question before and I just haven't had the opportunity or space to ask. So I thought I would just drop in.
Yeah. So Carlos, if you wouldn't mind just making sure that question also gets on our Q&A doc, the Google Basics Q&A doc.
Okay.
That'll make it a lot easier to follow up specifically with you
Awesome.
in terms of detailing on that question.
Okay. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. All right, everybody, it's 10:58, and I want to make sure that you can get into your other sessions for the day. I really appreciate your time, and good luck out there.